that Kifwa invested in. And what it does is that it goes to the capital markets, issues bonds, and uses the proceeds of those bonds to finance water service providers, only water. And as I said earlier on, water is the greenest you can get. And so the fact that we have a bond specifically for financing water then means green bonds are actually something that works in Kenya.
Fantastic, thank you, Joseph. And there's a gentleman just there who's an expert in this as well that you should talk to on water bonds as well, Hein from the Netherlands. Over to Eric for your perspectives on those specific issues around incentives, regulation, and green bonds.
Thank you.
Sorry, Eric, just before you do, we'll say goodbye to Joseph, who has to run for his flight, and maybe just give him a round of applause for his contributions. Thank you very much, Joseph. Sorry.
Yeah, on regulation to protect green investments, I believe in Rwanda we have some of the best regulations and environmental laws that protect these investments. However, at certain instances, you might find that because of the nature of some of these investments and the entrepreneurs and the financial muscle they possess, sometimes they can be abandoned because they do not have the required funding or financial resources to continue investing in these projects. We saw that it takes time for these green projects to start generating income. So if you are not able to enlist other investors to join you and make sure that you sustain these investments, I think some entrepreneurs might find it very difficult to sustain these investments and may decide to abandon the investments. But in terms of laws and regulations, I believe Rwanda stands very well in terms of environmental laws to protect such investments. On innovative financing mechanisms, including things like carbon tax, I think before you make such a decision to introduce a carbon tax, you need to ask yourself the ultimate party that pays the tax that you impose. So sometimes you might think that you are trying to protect the environment, but then it turns out that the tax becomes counterproductive and imposes unnecessary burden to your people who have limited capacities to pay or absorb new taxes. So it is always an issue when you want to introduce a new tax. But I believe in certain instances, it is more appropriate to impose this tax in order to continue financing the green agenda. Earlier on, an example was provided on one of the manufacturing companies in Rwanda that packages its drinks in PET bottles. And the Honorable Minister mentioned the revision in the current law aimed at making sure that if you cannot recycle or reuse or pay for the disposal of such items, then you have to pay something to the party that is involved in those activities. I believe that would be the right tax that could be imposed in such kinds of activities in order to make sure that you promote your green agenda. Then on green bonds or impact bonds, I believe it's a way to go. Most financial institutions and most governments have not done this, have not worked on green bonds, but I believe that it's a way that development finance institutions and governments, including local governments, can finance their green projects. that is something that BRD is considering to do possibly in the next 2 years. And I believe it's key that we pursue this route. But there is also another instrument, securitization, that can be used if you package your green portfolio and sell it out to investors. I believe there are many interested investors in securitization. You could also generate more resources to invest in different green projects. So I think that's all from me.
And you're working
Thank you.
on that here in Rwanda?
Yes, it is something that we are considering alongside the green bond. So I believe in future we should be having a number of projects a number of products to take to the market to
Fantastic.
raise more funding.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Gloria, would you like to come on in these questions?
Yeah, I want to make a comment on carbon taxes and carbon pricing. For me, I think carbon pricing is one of the opportunities to invest in green growth, because when you look at all the nationally determined contributions of countries, the NDCs, we have the conditional targets and the non-conditional targets. The conditional targets can only be made through such policy, carbon pricing instruments or policy instruments. And I would give an example. In Uganda, we have the Climate Change Act that is coming up, and one of the provisions in this climate change law will be for the country to explore innovative financing instruments like a carbon tax scheme, where currently in Uganda we have an environmental levy that is put on cars that are older than 10 years. Actually, we brought down the age limit for cars to be between 8 and 10 years. But now this environmental levy, one of the key discussions that are going on at cabinet level is to have a percentage of this levy into a kind of a tax scheme, which could be a carbon tax that would support green growth. So if we come up with an innovative financing instrument that would bring together all these different financing instruments, be it a carbon tax or environmental levy, which could be amalgamated into a carbon tax, for instance, it could be an emission trading scheme, you know very well, under the Paris Agreement, under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. There are quite a number of innovative financing instruments to trade emissions from one party to another. And these mitigation outcomes could be a country like Uganda or Rwanda could decide its own criteria to trade these emission reductions with another country, but in the long run, bringing in investment for green growth or climate action or renewable energy, anything, as long as it results into emission reductions. So I'm thinking that it's important to be open to look at these different innovative instruments that are applicable within the context of the countries. And also UNDP is also looking at exploring, these opportunities under, for instance, Article 6 of the Paris Agreement and, the transfer of mitigation outcomes from one party to another. How do we bring in all these instruments to incentivize private sector investment? So I think it's very crucial to focus on such elements here.
Excellent, thank you. And Tomo, there was a question for you on Komaza and incentives for farmers.
Thank you for the question. I think, to be very honest, Komaza treats all the farmers as an equal partners and business partners. So from our experience, I think the answer is really case by case depending on who you're working with. But just give an example of Komaza in coastal Kenya context. The area is really, really dry, and in the past 5 years, we've been through this most severe droughts in history for several times, and where all the livestock and cash crops like maize didn't really perform well or die at all. So these are the conditions, and farmers are looking for something that takes a long time, but still a more certain way to earn cash. So we are not really competing against maize and mangoes and other cash crops or products. We are instead proposing a way for farmers to build an asset just like a saving account. So that is how we pitch Komaza to farmers, and how actually 14% of the farmers are repeaters, so planting multiple years with Komaza. So we are not really thinking we are giving away something for free so farmers are signing up. farmers are always really entrepreneurial, making their severe judgment based on their families in life and death. So I think maybe in Rwandan context where soil quality is much better, more frequent rains, the value proposition might be different, but I think that can be also resolved by thinking about what are the products that we can sell better here, what are the ways that farmers will benefit more from the program, and how can we make the economics work for the company as well as for the farmers. And maybe like one example I can spot is an enterprise called Indian Airy, who we've met several times in the past. It's another way for engaging farmers potentially to work on the forestry sector, but in really, really different ways. So I think there are different approaches because I think forestry sector in particular has a really, really long value chain. So there are a lot of places to improve and make value out of it.
Fantastic. So we have 10 minutes left before closing. So I'd like to ask for a couple more questions from the audience and then final closing remarks from the panelists. So I think there was a question over here on the right at the front and one in the back, the gentleman with the orange tie and the lady here.
Merci. Je félicite d'abord la qualité des interventions que nous avons suivies. Mon attention a été appelée sur le projet Komaza. Il se trouve que c'est un projet agroforestier qui génère des chaînes de valeur économiques et sociales. Mais en termes de coûts, puisque nous sommes dans la logique de mettre en évidence tous les critères qui peuvent amener les investisseurs à financer des projets qui vont dans l'optique de la mise en œuvre de la croissance verte. Donc, en termes de coûts ou de gains environnementaux, est-ce que ce projet intègre, est-ce que vous prenez en compte le bilan carbone avant le projet, le bilan carbone après le projet? Parce que lorsque nous avons suivi l'intervention, vous dites on peut dire que c'est une période de mise en œuvre qui va jusqu'à 15 ans, et pendant cette période, les spéculations que vous avez mises sur Terre sont en train font de la photosynthèse et séquestrent une bonne partie du carbone, puisque c'est vraiment des actifs à valoriser dans le cadre de ce genre de projet. Donc j'aimerais savoir si vous en tenez compte et quel est le gap que vous établissez entre le niveau d'émission de carbone avant le projet et le niveau d'émission de carbone après le projet.
Yeah.
Merci.
Thank you. Thank you. And which organization are you from? Which organization are you from? Sorry.
I'm from Gabon. Je suis économiste du développement durable, ministère des eaux et forêts chargé de l'environnement et du développement durable.
Perfect.
Voilà, République gabonaise.
Thank you. And to the lady with the green shirt.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ineza from Rwanda. I'm from the Green Fighter. My concern goes to the CEO of BRD. You say that you have a way of bringing farmers into cooperatives so that they can face their environmental issues such as land degradation, desertification. But I have a concern. In the past 2 years, farmers are facing much issues, mainly due to climate change, mainly in the northwest of the country. So my question is what the mechanism are you putting in place so that you can work with the youth organizations in agriculture in order to raise the 21% of the fund from BRD to agriculture sector?
Thank you. The gentleman there. Any other burning questions from this side of the room? We haven't had any, maybe just one last one. Okay, please go ahead.
Merci beaucoup. Je suis Boulon Franklin. Je viens de la RDC, à l'Agence congolaise de l'environnement. En fait, je suis très intéressé par la discussion, par le forum, et je remercie beaucoup le gouvernement rwandais de pouvoir penser à ceci, du fait que vraiment nous voyons qu'au Rwanda, il y a vraiment des choses qui bougent dans le sens positif. Cependant, j'ai des craintes pour les Rwandais, ou les Rwandais et la RDC. Et je vois par exemple pour le projet Komaza, ils sont plus focalisés à l'est du pays, alors que nous, au centre, nous avons aussi des sérieux problèmes. En fait, le problème que je vois que les Rwandais vont connaître, c'est le problème du Congo. Le Congo, je ne veux pas dire qu'il y a, vous connaissez ce qu'il y a là-bas, il y a des problèmes, mais les Rwandais s'efforcent à pouvoir suivre les normes. Mais maintenant, ma préoccupation que j'ai par rapport à tout ce que nous venons de dire ici, est-ce que l'effort que le Rwanda est en train de fournir ne sera pas étouffé par ce qui se passe actuellement au Congo? Et quand vous traversez le Congo pour aller au Rwanda, il y a un dicton qui dit que environment has no boundary. So, je me demande, est-ce que ce que le Rwanda est en train de fournir comme effort, ça ne pourra pas être résorbé par ce qui se déroule au Congo? C'est pourquoi je suggérerais peut-être que les partenaires présents ici, qu'ils puissent également accompagner le Congo, malgré les difficultés qui se déroulent au Congo, pour que ce que le Rwanda est en train de fournir comme effort puisse également être durable et qu'il y ait une certaine résilience. C'est pourquoi nous appelons plus les projets Komaza, pour que ça vienne également chez nous, que ça puisse nous accompagner. Parce que les gens sont tous trompés par le fait que le Congo regorge beaucoup de forêts, alors qu'il y a une déforestation terrible qui se passe en RDC. Merci.
Oh, great. So thank you very much for that question. And one final question from the gentleman here in the second row to conclude, and then we'll pass to the panelists for final remarks on those questions.
The question is directed to our friend from Komaza. Do you see any long-term potential for RED Plus credits? Is that mechanism possibly available to you?
Nice, succinct question. Great. So, ladies first, Gloria. Final remarks on the questions and any closing remarks from your side.
Thank you very much. I think from all the key issues that have come up, it's just that there is no one size fits all for when it comes to climate finance. That's why we are talking about blended finance. And for me, one thing that I would like us to take from here is when it comes to private sector investments, we need to explore the different options, be it green bonds, be it, carbon markets, be it, these grant schemes that we are talking about. But I think one thing that we need to ensure is that all the different policy instruments we have at national level are translated into specific tangible investment plans or actions that would show the private sector the opportunity for them to finance. And then we have to ensure that we have this enabling framework from the policy reforms that we have in the different countries. We need to ensure that, the policy, be it in the energy sector or agriculture sector or water, or wetlands, are bringing issues to do with incentives to trigger investment on the side of private sector. So from my side, I think it would be good to blend all these different climate finance instruments together, but also ensure that the policy reforms we have at national level are incentivizing investment, and also to ensure that the investment plans are concretized into specific actions that would show that, this is the opportunity and this is what you can do and this is where the financing is, because there's a lot of financing going on and it's not now an issue of finance. The finance is available, but how do we bring all these different instruments and players together to have a specific concrete project that could be put forward for implementation? And the NDCs we have provide a good framework. And I think this would be the starting point for all countries, including Rwanda, Uganda, Kenya, to identify those specific actions within their NDCs that would be crucial for investment on the side of private sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gloria. Eric?
Thank you. To respond to the question from Neza on helping the youth into cooperatives and assisting them to make sure that they overcome the challenges of drought in the northwestern part of the country, and increasing our portfolio to beyond 21% in agriculture. So this is something that we are very much focused on. As a development bank, there's no reason why we should not consider the youth that I think about 70% of our population, and agriculture, of course, as a key sector of the economy, is our key sector of focus. Work with you and all the other youth that are involved in agriculture to make sure that we support your projects, to make sure that we help you get sustainable jobs, but also contribute to the development of this country. Some of the things that we'll be focusing on, I know that our agriculture has been suffering because of dependence on weather, and I believe that, as most of you always say, agriculture does not need rain. It's a final remark related to green financing and green development. I think that although Africa is late in terms of development, I think we have the opportunity not to make the mistakes that the developed world made in their development journey. I think because we are late, let's do it right. And as the Development Bank of Rwanda, we are prepared to make sure that we support green growth, making sure that we increase our investments in the green agenda of the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric. And Tomo, final remarks and responses to the questions.
Yeah. Thank you very much for two great questions, one from a gentleman from Gabon and another from Indian Rarity. I think in terms of cost effectiveness of Komaza's program, we are actually considerably cheaper compared to a cost of cost of establishing a plantation, which requires you to pay for the land trees. Having the need to fund the cost of land acquisition is a significant burden. And if we consider that our return on asset as an economics is about double to 4 times better than normal plantations, because we don't have to pay initially for the land. So that's more of a significant economic driver behind our model. And in terms of carbon credit and also potentially REDD+ accreditation, we have been actually in conversation with several consultants and stakeholders to assess what would be our impact. And it's always encouraging to see we can earn extra millions of dollars for something that we have been doing. But I think it is really important for us as an enterprise to be aware that there's always a risk for these policy changes and framework changes. So it's always a great upside news for investors in Komaza, but never the whole engine of growth. We believe the fundamental growth should come from the business model, not an environment that is surrounding us. So I think we're hopeful, but not going to rely on it. And final comment, I think it's been an incredible opportunity for us to present here today and also meet everyone, including policymakers, financial institutions, as well as entrepreneurs. And I think it would be great for us to keep the connection active and keep working together and learn together so that we can build a growing forestry and climate sector in Africa.
Hear to that. Yeah. Thank you, Tomo. So that brings us to the end of this panel. I think it's been a really exciting conversation. We've heard about the need to improve the visibility of the business opportunities for investors, for businesses to invest in climate resilience and low carbon opportunities, of the role of the public sector to come in, but on the same side, not crowding out the private sector We've heard about timelines of the need to be resilient when you're on that pathway to developing something really innovative and game-changing. We need to be persistent and patient, but at the same time, we need to be in a rush to reach the scale that is required. So lots of interesting insights and connections, I think, here across the panel. We're going to have concluding remarks from Mr. Alex Molisa, but just a couple of housekeeping sort of announcements here, that the next session on green finance will be on Thursday. So please do come along to that. And then now in our program, following Alex's final remarks, there will be business-to-business meetings or opportunities for you to network and discuss bilaterally and make connections both with panelists that you've heard today, but also amongst participants. And those meetings, there's a meeting space for that in MH3. So please do, after this panel, those bilateral meetings if you're interested. And just to finalize from my side, we would love to establish a climate finance innovation lab for East Africa or all of Africa. We've had an excellent collaboration with FNURWA over the years, and as I said, we've had now 12 innovative financial instruments being implemented in Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa. So we'd be really interested to talk to any partners that would be interested in taking that forward and developing something similar, really focused on Africa and with lots of public and private institutions involved in the process. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Mr. Alex Molisa, who's going to give us a few words of wisdom to conclude this session. And I'd like to thank all of the panelists for their contributions and wonderful insights.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you. I don't believe the applause was enough. Could you please? Thank you for that. If it wasn't for the officialities, if you will, or formalities, I think the panelists, Angela did a great job even in rounding up this, this session. But for purposes of official closing, I have a message from those who sent me to stand here and close. And they sent me because this is really important. I mean, a lot of times we say words for the sake of saying words, but this is really meant. It is important. We have been here for 2 days. But before I go into the 2 days and specifically for this investment forum today, I just want to have some remarks based on what we have had in this session. So for the segment itself, we've had climate finance and the private sector are crucial to spur economic growth at the community and national levels, and they present a huge potential for achieving SDGs. One of the pleasing things is the kind of specific projects that were described here. They are in the adaptation space. If you have been around this area for quite some time, it becomes really hard to think of how private sector and adaptation can work together. We've seen examples here, and that is a good message even for the Paris Agreement that all of us converge on in terms of implementing our national climate plans at the national level. Over the 2 days, it has become clear that innovations are required, including the right financial instruments. We've been talking about innovations. We've talked about innovative, I don't know how many times for those who are counting, but it really requires innovation to be able to bring financing to climate and more specifically to adaptation, as I have said. So one of the things we have learned over this period, and specifically in this segment, is the fact that it makes sense for private sector to even invest in adaptation. It really does. And there are innovations that can come with that. It requires innovation to design the kind of instruments that will allow private sector to invest in climate change and in adaptation. So it's something that we consider as a key takeaway message from the likes of projects we have had this afternoon. And talking about takeaway messages, we have gone around the world into conferences. We wanted to make a difference here in Rwanda in the sense that when we come here and talk, let's go beyond the talk. As they say, let's walk the talk. So I believe that there is a takeaway message for each and every one of you here to go and ponder about and go beyond the pondering and put into action. A lot of times we talk about what happens in Rwanda. There are extreme challenges, but we are determined that when we put a policy in the paper, when we put a strategy in the paper, it must translate into action. And that is something that we need to increasingly embrace when we are dealing with the kind of challenges like climate change. That's the only way we are going to be able to deal with climate change. More generally, this investment forum is coming to a close, but there are activities that continue. I think Angela has mentioned about what is happening tomorrow and the day after, and will culminate into a field trip to demonstrate that what we talk about, we make every effort to do. So that is what is coming on Friday, and I encourage each and every one of you who can to stick around and be able to be part of this experience. We are grateful to all of you, those who attended here, for your active participation in today's forum, the investment forum. It started setting the scene about the policies we put in place, how they have the potential to unleash investments that are so crucial as a pillar for implementation of these climate actions. Again, it is really important that when we are talking of financing, it's not about looking for free money. It's not about extracting money out of development partners. It's about creating the right kind of partnerships where we complement each other in our various needs as we consolidate our efforts to making things work, which is ensure that we implement climate actions. Or else, 2030 will be here. We will be taking stock of SDGs and the NDCs, and then we will be coming back to the starting point of our usual rise that we are going to be ambitious when we have had an opportunity to be ambitious and we've just missed it. So this is really important, and this is why even in the planning stages of this investment forum, we thought that everybody should go away with a message, and beyond the message, with something that they can act on, so that when we meet in the next Green Growth Forum, we can be able to demonstrate what we have actually achieved as a result of having met here today. And there is something that we are counting on each and every one of you as we meet next time to actually share where we have come from and where we are, and most importantly, the trajectory to 2030 that reverberates across SDGs and NDCs. This may be a hard-hitting message, but it is a real message. And I stand here by it to ensure that we can work together and be able to achieve, rather than to continue talking, however much talking is enough. I mean, it's done. On behalf of Rwanda, on behalf of the organizing committee, we want to acknowledge those who have contributed to this. We want to acknowledge those who have come to be part of this. We want to acknowledge